Well, hello there. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I was drained and burned out, and I talked about it in the 12th episode. So if you haven't listened to it, go back. It was a phenomenal episode, and it had the highest hit among all our episodes published. Well, I'm back. And I am super excited and energized to start the second season of Empowering Conversations. And I have a very special guest for you. She's from Andorra and migrated to San Diego, California 34 years ago. What was a temporary stay turned into an immigration. Together with her husband, they built one of the region's largest contract manufacturers before they sold it in 2014. Together, they founded ALMA Life Sciences, LLC, supporting over 20 life sciences companies. San Diego Business Journal names her one of the architects of the local life science sector. She's the first woman inducted into Connect Entrepreneur Hall of Fame. My guest this week is Dr. Magda Marquet, who will share her story and her obstacles to be where she is today, while giving many insights to female leaders looking to grow. So go ahead, grab your cup of tea, and join me in this episode of Empowering Conversations. Hello and welcome to the Empowering Conversations podcast, a place to get inspired, challenged, and empowered by stories of immigrants who build their success from zero. I'm your host, Mehran.
So I grew up in a very small country called Andorra, which is in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain in Europe. It's a very small country. 70,000 people live there. When I was growing up, it was about 10,000 people. And, when I was a child, I always liked science, but I also was thinking that I would come back to my country, and in terms of professions, there wasn't much going on. My parents had a small hotel. I could consider maybe, since I like science, become a civil engineer or an MD. But, that was all there was. So I went to high school to France because we didn't have a high school in my small country. And there, something really sad and dramatic happened to me when I was 15 years old, and I was dealing with the emotions of a teenager being alone in a different country. And then I found out that my mom had terminal cancer and was in very bad shape. And it was very difficult for me. But I think somehow when I look at, years later, why did I choose the path I chose? It's because the fact that I faced this drama in my life gave me the clear purpose of really wanting to have a career in that field, right? Biotechnology didn't exist yet, but somehow I ended up in biotech. So I pursue my studies in biology, biochemical engineering, and then my first job was at a company called Transgene in Strasbourg. At the time, in the early 80s, it was the only biotech company in Europe. And when I was there, which was a wonderful opportunity, I met people from around the world who were coming there and did the early days of cloning experiments and producing molecules, mainly biologics, using recombinant DNA. So I was fascinated by that. But I also found out that if I wanted to be much closer to a cluster where things were happening in biotech, then I had to consider the US. My husband was also doing his PhD at the Pasteur Institute in molecular biology. So we were in our late 20s and we thought, we have to go to the US. And already at the time, there were 3 clusters, one in Boston, one in the Bay Area, and the other one in San Diego. We thought Boston probably is too close to Europe in a way, so let's go all the way, let's go and explore California. And then we ended up in San Diego because my husband related to be at UCSD for his postdoc. So we came to San Diego not knowing anyone just with a piece of luggage, and we came with the mentality of explorers. We didn't think we were going to emigrate to the US. I mean, it was a possibility, but I think that we were thinking more like, okay, we're going to explore California. We are going to be learning new things, at least improve our English a bit, and then we'll come back. And time just flew, and now it's been like, more than 30 years, and we're still here, and we're still in San Diego. So it's this is really my journey, and it's been fascinating.
What were some of the difficulties that you faced along the way? Because every immigrant has their own story, their own difficulties, their own challenges, and things that they learned. What were some of the challenges that you faced?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I faced a lot of challenges, I would say, even before coming, because I had a job at the time. And then in Europe, when you have a job, you keep it usually. So when I was telling my coworkers, I'm going to go to the US, I'm going to resign from my job, and they were saying, are you nuts or what? This is totally stupid. You'll never find a good job there. It's going to be, you'll regret it. And so that was really a difficulty, because I thought, okay, well, maybe they're right and I'm wrong, and that's really bad. So I had to face all the naysayers that were telling me, I think to protect me actually, but just saying, this is not a good idea. So that was the first issue. And then when I finally had the strength and courage to write this resignation letter, came to San Diego, we didn't know anyone. And then it was December 16, 1986. And we were greeted by a wonderful lady called Bernie Miller. And Bernie was a volunteer at UCSD, and she helped people like us, lost foreign students, and gave them the possibility to stay at their house for 2 or 3 days, and then help them find a place, buy a car. And she was just absolutely wonderful. You're asking me about difficulties, and of course I had difficulties to come to a different country, totally not knowing much, but that's not what comes to mind. What comes to mind is the fact that what I found is many people who were very willing to help, willing to help us, find our first car or find a place to stay, anything that would make our life easier. And then also finding a job, which was a complicated thing for all of us. I applied for a job, and there were not many biotech companies in San Diego, and we came, maybe 5 companies. And I had letters of recommendation from my professors, and I was like really knocking on doors with my CV and my letter of recommendation. And I was lucky because I was able to find a job at a company called Sintro. And they first interviewed me. I guess they liked my CV. And then they asked me to give a seminar, because this is kind of common when you're in the science world, to give like a seminar of what you've done. And it was 1-hour seminar, and it was in English, of course. And I thought I was going to die. I thought that was going to be, oh my gosh. And my husband helped me put together the seminar at night. I think that we spent all night putting together these transparencies that we were doing at the time. And I went and I gave the seminar, and they were really nice because they gave me the job. And one thing that really helped me find a job at the beginning was the fact that my background was slightly different. San Diego is still to this day an incredible place for basic research, molecular biology, cell biology, a lot going on already at the time. But my background was engineering and development. So I was taking like one molecule or one concept and making a product out of it. And that was not as common at the time. And I think that's what really helped me to land the job.
Sometimes we have a different set of skills, a different background, a different accent, and we think to ourselves, They will not hire me because I don't have X, Y, or Z skill, because I look different, because I have an accent, because my name is different, because I'm not fluent in English. Part of it might be true for some, but different is what many companies are looking for right now. You, with your different background, will bring different ideas and different ways to problem solve. So, coaching tip: don't limit yourself by negative self-talk. If there is a limitation, let others limit you. You'll find the silver lining and sell your difference as an asset.
So I am so happy I have this job, which is better than what I had in France. But I had to go and attend meetings, and I had a hard time understanding what people were saying, because the English I learned was the English from Britain. So I was coming here and just, Americans, I had a very hard time understanding. Now it's the other way around. Now I watch a movie from England and I just have a hard time understanding it. But at the time it was really difficult. So I was in these meetings and I wanted to make a point. And by the time I knew what I was going to say, you were going to do the other point of the agenda. So I was like, oh my gosh, I was arriving at home with a major headache every night. But it was really interesting. I learned a lot, and I had my job I started in, I think, February of '87. And then in September, I was promoted. I thought, my gosh, this is amazing. I was just so happy to have had this trajectory. And then in October, major issue in Wall Street where everything went downhill. And then the company after that had terrible difficulties. And here I was. So I guess, lots of ups and downs, but nothing that happened to me because I was, I guess, an immigrant. I think I had to learn a lot, because it was like, being thrown into a river and having to figure out how to swim. But it was a fascinating time in my career. And I remember that in terms of learning, I learned so much in this first 6 months, because it was accelerated learning.
Tell us about your journey to be a founder and a CEO. How did you go from, being hired first time in February of '86, you said?
87.
87 to be a founder, CEO?
So I started in biotech, having my first job in biotech in early '87, and then after that I had several other very interesting jobs, I would say, in biotechnology. And the last job that I had before starting my company was at a company called Vical, and we were developing vaccines, DNA vaccines. In fact, now it's very fashionable, I guess, to make DNA vaccines for COVID-19, for example. So we were doing that almost 30 years ago, and also gene therapy. So I was fascinated by what I was doing. I was in charge of a team that put together the first method and specifications for a DNA product. So we had to go to the FDA and then make sure that we did everything that we could to make sure it was safe. So I learned a lot, but I think it gave me the bug. I also realized at the time that we could do better in terms of helping investigators or labs around the country and around the world, going from a concept to a product faster. So I thought, there's something we can do there. And I was fascinated by the field of gene therapy. So that was the late 90s. And my husband and I decided that maybe it would be a good idea to create a company around that, around facilitating development of gene therapy and DNA vaccine products. So we thought, okay, maybe we should do something together. My background is more in product development. His background is in basic research and clinical development. So we put together a business plan that used our two backgrounds and our ideas. And I mean, as you can imagine, Maran, it's that was not well received. So, husband and wife, we were scientists, but we didn't have any business, clue, frankly. And immigrants, and you're going to put together a business plan and go and present it to people and expect they'll invest in you. I'll say, sure. And do you have any intellectual property? No, we don't, because we come from two companies, so we don't have just an idea to do things better. And in biotech, as you know, you need to have intellectual property and patents and to really attract investors. So we don't have any of that. But what we had, and I'm going back to your story about being an immigrant, we had a big dream. I think that all of us, when we come to a different country, we really have fire in our belly. We don't come here just to have a job and just to go by. We had a dream. We really thought we were going to do that. So our friends, once again, were saying, you guys are nuts. It's just not a good idea. You have two good jobs. Maybe one of you goes with the company and then the other one keeps the job. We had two young kids at the time, two young boys as well, and all our family overseas. And we were also turning 40 that year. So we thought, okay, we have to do it now. We cannot just wait for all the conditions in the universe, all the stars to be aligned. Let's go ahead and do it. We were lucky, the CEOs of the two companies we were working at, that said, okay, we'll be with you. We'll write the first check and then we'll be on your board. So that gave us the credibility to say, these two guys are in, so maybe it's not a bad idea after all. So this is how it started.
Now, I'm curious whether, given your background and what you said about you and your husband started a company and you had the support of the executives and you wrote the business plan, have you ever felt there was a cap on your growth?
Well, I think that all of us sometimes can be our worst enemies. So if there is a cap, it's going to be the cap that I put myself, on. I don't see life like that. I see life as an adventure, as an opportunity to learn about myself. I don't think there is a cap. Maybe I'm a bit naive, but I think it depends also on what's your purpose, what drives you, what motivates you. So I really see life like that. It's really a question, what can I learn? How can I grow? How can I contribute? So if you have these kind of questions, I don't think there is a cap. It's not easy because you're kind of in an open field there, but I don't think there is a cap or a perception there.
Mm.
I mean, as women, I think we tend to, and I did that for many years in my career, I tended to put myself in these situations where I had these artificial or these beliefs that were saying, oh, because I'm a woman, I cannot do this, I cannot do that, and it's just not true. So I think it's very important for all of us, not just women, but all of us, to look at our beliefs and see, is it really true? And which ones are helping me, or which ones do I need to let go? Because maybe they helped me for a certain time, but now it's time to let them go.
Mm-hmm. What were some real obstacles? So now you mentioned that, internally you had some obstacles. What were some real obstacles along the way for you? Whether that was at home, at work, with your colleague, or...
Oh, I mean, there's so many, so many, because I think that this is how you grow, how life goes sometimes. It's like when you're an entrepreneur, it's kind of one thing after the other. I mean, my experience has not been like an easy path. It's been a series of obstacles. So the first obstacle is, as an entrepreneur, is like you have to you raise capital, right? This is always a big obstacle. So once to be able to raise the capital to start the business. So we were able to do that. It was at the time more everything was about .com. So we were going to, I remember once we went to a lunch meeting and we wanted to pitch our story to a potential investor. And all he was telling us about was a great story of his nephew starting a .com business selling scarves or whatever it was. And he was all excited about that. And that was 1998, 2000. So that was the first obstacle. And then the second obstacle is like once you have the money in the bank and then you have to hire a team, it's a competitive arena. Maybe not many people wanted to go to a startup with, starting from scratch. So starting the team was also not an easy endeavor. And then once we started like having a bit of a momentum and having customers going relatively well, then something happened which was a major, major obstacle, which could have killed us. I think it was 1999. And as I told you before, we were working in the field of gene therapy and DNA vaccines. Something happened which was not related to what we were doing, but a young gentleman died in a clinical trial in Pennsylvania, and it was a clinical trial of gene therapy. And his dad became, of course, a warrior, and he decided by being an activist that he would stop the field of gene therapy because the field was not ready to really treat humans with it. And he was right. He was absolutely right. But that almost killed us. All of a sudden, we didn't have any business. We thought, gosh, we're done here because all the companies that work in gene therapy, our customers, our partners, are not there anymore. So that was a major, major obstacle. And then what we did is that we looked at the staff and we thought, what are their skills? What are our skills? And then there was already a lot of emphasis in biologics at the time. And we thought, okay, maybe we can shift gears and then change our focus and become a biologics company. And that's what we did. That was major. That was very, very tough. And then as we grew, it was, challenges you always face challenges because the field of biotech, not only you have to develop products that work, but you have to deal with the regulatory agencies. You have to have this extra layer, which is extremely complicated. So I think that it's an endurance game. You have to go in there like thinking that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
I'm someone who believes that magnitude of our challenges depend on the path we choose. We immigrants chose an incredibly tough one. Our path might be slightly more bumpy, unpaved, and perhaps a little longer, but perseverance makes the journey a success. As Magda puts it, this is an endurance game. Coaching tip: look at the biggest challenge you're facing at the moment, whether it's pandemic related or not. Put on a new lens of opportunity. Think about what do you need to learn in order to overcome this obstacle. What do you have to endure? And what do you need to change?
The other day we talked about female leadership, and as you were just starting to talk about it, in opinion, what is the biggest obstacle for women to reach higher position, to become board members? Because we know despite women making 50% of the workforce and being the PhD graduates, they don't make it to the top. Why is it, in your opinion? And what is the advice that you usually give these women that you mentor?
Yeah, well, I think that if you look at the numbers, you're absolutely right. We're not there, and we all benefit by having more diversity in the boardroom or in every aspect of society. I think some of it's generational, and some of it's really related to time. What I mean by that is that, yes, we're not where we should be, but I see a major improvement compared to where we were 20 years ago. I think that we're getting there. What can we do to accelerate this, perhaps? and to make it better for women to have access to board roles, for example, and better for companies to have access to great women to have in their boards, because it's a win-win. And again, I've been asking myself this question, and it's not just having a quota. That's certainly not enough. So I've been participating to several programs of mentoring women and then making them board ready. And I have a couple of observations there. So when women apply to this board ready program, they already are board ready, but they don't know. So they have already an incredible resume. They have great experience, great leadership skills, but they go into these programs thinking, oh, maybe I don't have enough. Maybe I need to go and get additional training. And I think the main thing we're lacking as women is visibility and exposure. And realizing that sometimes you get a board position because you are in a golf course or you are in a place where men tend to discuss, their needs. And we are too academic in a way. We think, oh my gosh, if I go and get, let's say I'm a scientist, if I go and get a business degree, then I'll be board ready. Sure, I mean, education is always great, and I'll never say don't do it, because I believe that it's very important to always educate ourselves. But I believe that the key is to be visible, to network, to be out there, and to say it. We have to say we want to be on boards. We don't want to wait for someone to see our talent. We have this problem regarding promotions, right? As women, we wait for someone to realize how wonderful we are and to give us this great promotion. And then we're disappointed because someone else had it. And men can be more upfront and say, listen, I deserve this. I think I can do a very good job. I think I can help the company. Give me this possibility. So, I mean, I am generalizing, and generalizing it's never good because, of course, we're all different. But I can see these common traits. And I think that we have to help each other and make an effort not to be as perfect as we think we have to be sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned visibility. How can women, I think as minority, can be a little more visible? Because sometimes it could be a clash of cultures as well. Of course, women in general, most of them do wait to be seen, but there is a cultural component to it as well. Certain cultures are more hierarchical. What is it that you learned in your family, in your background? And when you bring it here, what happens at workforce? Do you have any suggestions to navigate that? Any insight that you can share with our audience?
What I usually say is you have to go out there and network. Right now, there's no way we can network. We're all stuck at home doing Zoom meetings. So that strategy is not working that well, right? But I think that there is things that we can do, and we have to do it in a subtle way, because you're absolutely right. There are cultural, and also as women, if we're too out there in your face, that won't go well either. I mean, I think we have to be very assertive, but not go on to the aggressive side, because a guy can be aggressive. A woman, if she's too aggressive, it won't go that well. However, I think you can be very assertive, and there is a big difference between the two. It's a difficult question these days, because, like I said, my first answer to you would have been, you have to go out there and network and find connections, but in a very friendly way. You don't have to be like pushing too hard, right? And maybe not to be as hard on yourself. I think one of the major issues we face as women is that if we go back to the way we were raised, and now it's changing because the young girls have different ways of being raised. But I go back to when I was being raised, and this sense of perfection, like when you're a girl, everything has to be kind of perfect. When you're a boy and you can go and play sports and you can lose, or you can win, or you can fail, or you can hurt yourself, and all of that is okay. Failure is never pleasant, but I think that you have a better idea that even if you fall and you don't have your best shot at goal, you're okay. And as women, when I was growing up, everything had to be kind of perfect. Now it's different. When I see all these girls playing soccer, I think that's probably the best thing we can do to educate the next generation of female leaders, frankly. It has to start in a soccer field or something that's really different than an academic setting. Because something that always puzzled me is that I see schools, I see that girls are extremely good, like they're the top of the class in the elementary school, middle school, high school, but then as you go up, they tend to, disappear a bit. And it's like, what is it? It's not the intellectual capabilities. It's not that. It's their belief. It's the fact that I think society also has a lot of demands for women. I mean, we have to be mothers, we have to be wives, we have to be professionals, we have to juggle all of that, right? So we have all these expectations that sometimes can be way too heavy. So another thing we have to be as women is we have to be able to ask for help. Like, I need help, I need guidance. And you can ask help from your husband or from your coworker. You can do that. And I've been mentoring young women who have a very hard time asking for help. It's like, no, I'll do it. I'll just keep working and I'll do it. And you need to delegate. You need to ask for help.
Recently, I held a workshop on perfectionism and ways it affects our careers. Over 90% of my attendees were women. Statistics show perfectionism is higher in women. And how does it affect us? Our ability to delegate, as Magda pointed out. Coaching tip. If you're a woman listening to this episode, I highly recommend listening to our 8th episode, where I talk about roots of perfectionism, how it impacts your life, your career, your relationship. And also I will share many tips on ways to recover from it.
Have you ever had to lay off people? Did you ever have to make that kind of decision? And if so, how did you do it? Because I had someone that talked to me a few days back, and she said, I'm fearful of growing because I don't know how to make such decisions the way that it impact other lives. What advice would you give someone like her?
Well, I think the advice I would give is that sometimes things don't go the way that you think they're going to go. Either you're facing the pandemic we're facing now, or you're developing a project that for whatever reason, let's say you develop a clinical project and you don't have the results that you want, or the FDA doesn't give you the green light or whatever, and then you have to lay people off. It's a very painful decision. Let me start by saying that. It's very painful. I think the way you have to do it is you have to do it with respect and compassion, and then also be as helpful as you can to your people and just tell them, okay, this is the situation. It's not personal. This is what we're facing. We have to make this decision. Give them help them with benefits if possible. Help them with coaching, and best of all, use the right words. I think what hurts more. I mean, I've never been laid off, which let me knock on wood. So I cannot really say, by personal experience. But I think what hurts probably more is not just the fact that you don't have a job anymore, but the fact that you feel that either you haven't been treated in a respectful way, or you've done something wrong, or you feel a big loss, right? So I think that you have to make sure that you treat people with compassion. I mean, what happened with COVID, the times where we had to make a layoff, we told people, as soon as we get the opportunity, we'll get you back in. And we will, because in some cases, I mean, it's very painful. It's painful for the people you lay off. It's very painful for the organization as well, because all of a sudden you don't have the same, enthusiasm, energy, and teamwork. So it's a very painful decision, but you have to do it with compassion and with respect, and with and be very straightforward with with the people who are in this situation. It is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, your friend is absolutely right. This is tough.
Mm.
Yeah.
I know that you're a board member to one of the companies, at least one of the companies that I know they're working on COVID-19. What are your thoughts on that? Because you also alluded that Vical was the company that you also tried to make vaccines for viruses. What are your thoughts on that? Optimism, possibilities?
Let me start by saying that vaccines are very hard to develop. I mean, there are a lot of infectious diseases out there where we still don't have a vaccine for. I mean, HIV is one of them. Even if there's been so many teams and so many developments and so many millions and millions of dollars. So it's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing to do. However, that doesn't say we shouldn't do it. I think that, when you look at the pandemic, such as the one we're facing right now, the one we're living, we're facing a colossal challenge. So the first thing that, in my view, we have to do is to protect the population. And we protect the population by first test individuals as much as we can, have safe measures on the way we live, and then develop a vaccine. I mean, there are several efforts around the world, companies or labs that develop vaccines using completely different strategies. I wouldn't be able to tell you which one will be the best. And frankly, I don't think that's important. I think it's not a competition, it's a cooperation, and we need to make sure that, one of them makes it. And we'll see. The company where I am on the board of, Arcturus Therapeutics, works on RNA vaccines. So that's different from the things that I was doing 2-3 decades ago, which was DNA vaccines, but it's still nucleic acid-based vaccines. If you compare the nucleic acid-based vaccines to the other more traditional vaccines, I think one of the main advantages is that they're easier to make and they're easier to scale up. And then with a relatively small amount, you can vaccinate a huge population. For example, the vaccine that we're developing at Arcturus Therapeutics, with 10 grams, which is the equivalent of your thumb, could vaccinate millions of people. So think about it. We're talking about something pretty practical. If it works, it has to work. So going back to what I was saying, Miran, so I think that in what we have to do to address this major issue is, first of all, testing, second, vaccine, and then third, therapeutic, and not in that order. Obviously, all the development goes at the same time because you address different kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not easy.
It is not easy, but we have to stay optimistic.
Absolutely.
What is your dream?
I dream that COVID-19 will lead to a better world. I dream of a place where we feel that we're all together. There's two ways that we can act after this pandemic. One is to become even more isolated and blaming each other and then go backward. And the other one, which is my dream, is that we'll become more connected. We'll realize that we're all the same. We'll help each other and we'll be more respectful of each other, more respectful of planet Earth, and happier. So that's my dream.
That's beautiful.
Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen.
And women actually will play a big role there, because I think that by nature, we are a lot more connected. We are a lot more caring. So I think that we have to be out there. We have a big role to play in the after COVID area.
Thank you again, Magda. It was a great honor to talk with you. I've learned so much from you.
Well, you're very kind. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing. I think it's wonderful to give a voice to all of us. That's wonderful. Thank you.
It was a great honor to sit with Magda and learn from her for over 2 hours in the process of creating this podcast. Her presence and her attitude reminded me of this quote from Dalai Lama. The more you're motivated by love, the more fearless and free your actions will be. As we are widening our lenses during these trying times, let's learn to lead with more compassion. Compassion for ourselves and for everyone around us. As always, thank you for listening and sharing our podcast. You, my audience, mean the world to me, and I know I will see you and your friends in the next episode of Empowering Conversations, where all of us can learn from successful immigrants, one conversation at a time.